There is this moment that happens when you look at your banking app and instead of feeling that familiar knot in your stomach, you actually feel calm, maybe even a little proud. You're not doing mental calculations about whether that dinner out means skipping lunch tomorrow or whether buying new shoes requires sacrificing something else this month. Your brain isn't in permanent damage control mode anymore for most people. This shift happens at a very specific number, and it is way smaller than you'd think. Financial experts love throwing around big numbers. They'll tell you that you need $1 million to retire comfortably, or that hitting 6 figures is when you've really made it. But they're overlooking something crucial. There is a much smaller milestone that completely rewires how you interact with money. And once you cross it, the entire game changes. That number is $20,000. I'm Leo, and I'm borderline obsessed with understanding money psychology and why some people seem to effortlessly accumulate wealth, while others stay stuck spinning their wheels for decades. If you want to understand the actual mechanics of wealth building, instead of just hoping things magically improve someday, hit subscribe and drop a like, if this ends up shifting how you see your finances. Before we dig into why 20,000 is the real inflection point, let me ask you something. When you picture building wealth, what image comes to mind? Maybe it is some trust fund kid who never had to think about money. Or maybe it is someone grinding away for years, slowly accumulating wealth $1 at a time through sheer discipline and sacrifice. The reality is that wealth building doesn't work the way most people imagine it does. Here is what actually happens. There are specific financial thresholds that function like invisible force fields. Once you break through them, the rules of engagement completely transform. $20,000 is the first major threshold separating people who will build significant wealth from those who will spend their entire lives trapped in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. And the insane part is most people don't even know this threshold exists. Think about pushing a massive boulder uphill. The beginning is absolutely brutal. You're straining, sweating, barely making any visible progress, questioning whether it is even possible to move this thing. But once you generate enough momentum, something changes. The boulder starts moving faster, and eventually when you reach the crest, it rolls down the other side, almost on its own. $20,000 is that crest. Everything before this point feels like you're fighting gravity. Everything after feels like gravity is working for you instead of against you. But here is where this gets fascinating, and it is probably going to surprise you. The difference isn't purely mathematical. It is not just that you have more capital to invest, or that your returns are larger in absolute terms. The real transformation happens in your brain when you don't have money saved. Your brain operates in what psychologists call survival mode. Every financial decision gets filtered through fear and scarcity. You accept the first job offer that comes along, even if it is terrible, because you can't afford to be selective. You stay in situations you hate because leaving feels impossibly risky. You agree to things you don't want to do because you need the money desperately. This isn't about being practical or responsible. When you're operating in survival mode, your brain literally cannot think about growth and opportunity. It is like trying to plan next year's vacation while your house is actively burning down. Your mental bandwidth is completely consumed by immediate threats and short-term survival calculations. But something genuinely remarkable happens when you cross that 20,000 threshold. Instead of being purely reactive to whatever financial crisis emerges, you become proactive about wealth building. Research from Vanguard demonstrates that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases your financial well-being by 21%. $2,000 that is less than most people spend on a single vacation or a decent laptop. But that small buffer creates a massive psychological shift because it moves you out of pure survival mode. When you push that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for most people lands somewhere around $20,000, you get another 13% boost in financial well-being. More importantly, you've now created enough breathing room for your brain to start thinking about wealth building instead of just wealth preservation. Here is where the mathematics starts getting genuinely exciting. Let's say you're saving $1,000 every month and earning an 8% return on your investments. Getting to your first $20,000 takes approximately 19 months of consistent saving and investing. That is a 1.5 years of discipline, sacrifice, and delayed gratification. It is not easy. And frankly, most people quit somewhere along the way. But here is the part that is going to blow your mind. Your second $20,000 doesn't take another 19 months. It only requires about 17 months. Why? Because now you've got that first 20,000 working alongside your monthly contributions, generating its own returns. Think about this for a second. You did the exact same amount of work, saved the same amount monthly, took the same level of risk with your investments, but you shaved 2 full months off the timeline just because you had more money working for you. That is compound interest starting to flex its muscles. By the time you're pursuing your third 20,000, the timeline compresses even more. Your money is doing an increasing share of the heavy lifting while your effort remains constant. And when you reach the really substantial numbers, the acceleration becomes almost absurd. Once you hit 400,000 in your investment portfolio, you can generate your next 20,000 in just 5 months. The same amount that took you nearly 2 years to save initially is now happening automatically through your investments. That first milestone feels impossible, but every milestone after that gets progressively easier. Now you might be thinking that wealthy people have access to some secret investment universe that regular folks can't access. Like there are exclusive hedge funds or special opportunities that only unlock once you reach certain wealth levels. And while there is some truth to that at the ultra high, and it is not what is driving this 20,000 phenomenon, the real secret is much simpler and honestly much more encouraging. It is just basic mathematics working in your favor. When you invest $1,000 and it grows 10% in a year, you make $100. Take that exact same 10% growth rate and apply it to $10,000, and suddenly you're looking at $1,000 in profit from the same investment. Same time frame, same level of risk. This is why hitting 20,000 feels like such a turning point. Up until that point, your investment returns feel almost insignificant because you're working with smaller amounts. A 10% return on 2,000 is $200 nice, but not exactly life-changing. But a 10% return on 20,000 is $2,000. Now we're talking about money that actually matters. When you've got 20,000 sitting in investments, earning 8% annually, that is $1,600 flowing into your account over the course of a year without you lifting a finger. Money you didn't have to earn through your job. Money that showed up because your existing money was working on your behalf. The investment strategy isn't any more sophisticated than what someone with $1,000 can use. You can buy the exact same index funds, use the same brokerages, follow the same basic principles. The only difference is scale, and that scale transforms small percentage wins into real financial progress. But here is the part that most people completely miss, and it might be the most important point in this entire video. When you save $20,000, you've actually accomplished something far more valuable than just accumulating money in a bank account. You've fundamentally rewired your brain and built the most important financial habit you'll ever develop. Think about what it actually takes to save $20,000 if you're starting from zero. Unless you're making ridiculous money or living rent free in your parents' basement, this requires serious discipline. You had to track where every dollar was going. You had to decline things you wanted so you could set money aside. Instead, you had to resist the urge to blow your savings on whatever shiny object caught your attention that week. Most importantly, you had to do all of this consistently for months or even years. You proved to yourself that you can control your money instead of letting it control you. You became the type of person who can delay gratification when it really matters. That is not just a financial skill, that is a life skill. This identity shift is enormous because it affects every financial decision you make going forward. Before you had 20,000 saved, buying a $4 coffee might have required mental gymnastics about whether you could afford it. After you hit 20,000, you're not sweating the small stuff anymore because you know you have your priorities straight. You've proven you can make the big sacrifices when necessary. But there is another psychological shift that happens at this level that most people don't talk about. You start seeing opportunities instead of just threats. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, every unexpected expense feels like a disaster. Your car needs repairs. Your laptop dies. Your rent increases. These aren't opportunities. They're financial emergencies that derail your entire month. But when you have 20,000 in the bank, these same events become minor inconveniences at worst. Your car needs repairs. Annoying, but not catastrophic. Your laptop dies. Time to upgrade to something better. Your rent goes up. Maybe it is time to finally look for a better place or negotiate your salary. Even better, you start noticing opportunities that were always there, but you couldn't capitalize on before. Your friend mentions they're starting a business and looking for investors before. You would have thought, that sounds interesting, and moved on. Now you can actually consider whether it is worth allocating $5,000 to it. A killer deal appears on a rental property that needs some work. Before, you would have scrolled past it on Zillow feeling envious. Now you can run the numbers and see if it makes sense as an investment. This is what wealthy people mean when they say money goes to money. It is not some cosmic conspiracy where the universe rewards people who already have cash. It is that having money gives you options, and options create more opportunities to make money. Here is something else that happens around the 20,000 mark that will make you question everything you thought you knew about budgeting. You start caring less about small expenses and more about big ones. I know that sounds backwards, but hear me out. When you're broke, you obsess over every purchase. Should I buy the name brand cereal or the generic version? Is it worth spending $3 on coffee when I could make it at home? These decisions consume mental energy because every dollar feels precious. But when you have a solid financial foundation, you realize these micro decisions are largely irrelevant. The difference between spending $3 on coffee versus making it at home is maybe $1,000 per year. If you're really going overboard, that is not nothing. But it is not going to make or break your financial future either. What matters are the big decisions: where you live, what you drive, how much you save, where you invest. These choices can swing your net worth by tens of thousands of dollars over time. So instead of agonizing over whether to buy the organic bananas, you focus your energy on optimizing your housing costs, maximizing your income, and making sure your investment strategy is solid. Now let's talk about what happens to your career once you hit this milestone, because this is where things get really interesting. Having 20,000 saved doesn't just change your relationship with money, it changes your relationship with work. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're essentially trapped in whatever job you currently have. Your boss could be terrible. Your coworkers could be toxic. The work could be mind-numbing, but you can't leave because you need that next paycheck to survive. This puts you in an incredibly weak negotiating position. But 20,000 changes the entire dynamic. Suddenly you have what I call walking away money. You could quit tomorrow and survive for months while you find something better. This doesn't mean you should be reckless or burn bridges unnecessarily, but it means you're negotiating from a position of strength instead of desperation. Here is what is really crazy. Often you don't even need to use your walking away money. Just having it changes your entire demeanor at work. You become more confident, more assertive, more willing to take on challenging projects. And guess what happens when you show up differently? People notice. Suddenly you're getting better assignments, more recognition, and yes, more money. But here is where most people mess this up, and I see it constantly. They hit 20,000, feel that psychological shift, and then immediately blow it on something stupid. Maybe they decide they deserve a new car since they've been so disciplined, or they take an expensive vacation because they've earned it. Don't do this. That 20,000 is not a reward for good behavior. It is the foundation of your entire financial future. The average person spends more money on their car over their lifetime than it would take to achieve complete financial independence. Between car payments, insurance, maintenance, and gas, most people are dropping $600 to $800 every single month on transportation. Over a 40-year period, that is easily $400,000 or more, just to get from point A to point B. Meanwhile, they're complaining they can't afford to save for retirement. Here's the thing that makes this even more ridiculous. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses about 20% of its value. So you're not just spending money, you're actively destroying wealth. Compare that to investing the same amount in a diversified portfolio. Instead of watching your money evaporate, you're watching it multiply. This is where having 20,000 saved completely changes your perspective on major purchases. Instead of thinking, can I afford the monthly payment? You start thinking, what is this really costing me in terms of opportunity? That $30,000 car isn't just $30,000. It is $30,000 that could have grown to over $200,000 in your investment account over 20 years. Look, $20,000 isn't going to make you rich overnight, but it will fundamentally change how you think about money and opportunity. It is the difference between surviving and thriving, between reacting to life and designing it. Start building that foundation today, because your future self is counting on the decisions you make right now. Trust me, they'll thank you for it. I am not a financial advisor, mortgage expert, or licensed financial professional. The content on this channel represents personal opinions only and is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. Please conduct your own research and seek professional guidance before making any major financial decisions. See you next time.